Chapter 11, Section 4, Circumference and Arc Length. Let's review really quickly what the circumference is. The circumference C of a circle is C equals pi times d, or 2 times pi times r, where d is the diameter and r is the radius of a circle. So just really quickly remember that the diameter goes all the way through the center of the circle and is connected to the circle on both sides. The radius is going to start at the center of the circle and just reach to one side of a circle. If you remember the relationship, the diameter is 2 times the radius, or the radius is half of the diameter. It asks us to solve for a stool with a circular seat. A asks us to find the circumference of a seat with a radius of 9 inches. We're going to use the 2 times pi times radius since we're given radius. So 2 times 9 times pi. Well, 2 times 9 is 18. If I wanted to leave this in terms of pi, I could leave it as 18 pi inches. But I can also go ahead and multiply it out. Just use 3.14 for pi, and you get 56.52 inches. B asks us to find the radius of a seat with a circumference of 52 inches. This time they've given me the circumference. They want us to find the radius. So what I'm going to say is 2 times radius times pi equals 52. Go ahead and divide both sides by 2, and you get radius times pi equals 26. Divide both sides by pi, and you get the radius is going to be about 8.3 inches. Arc length. The arc length is a proportion of the circumference of a circle. You can use is a portion of the circumference of a circle. You can use the measure of the arc in degrees to find its length in linear units. So far, if you remember, we've talked about arc measure, and we would say that the measure of an arc is going to be equal to the intercepted arc, the central angle that is intercepting the arc. Now we're going to be able to say the arc length, so we're going to actually be able to say, instead of an arc measure, which is 52 degrees, we're going to be able to actually say the arc length, which would be something like, for example, 5 inches. The arc would be 5 inches long. The arc length corollary says that in a circle, the ratio of the length of a given arc to the circumference is equal to the ratio of the measure of the arc to 360. Written out in notation, it says the arc length of arc AB over 2 times pi times radius, which remember 2 times pi times radius is the circumference, is going to be equal to the measure of arc AB over 360. So in the left ratio, we're talking about the circumference and the length in linear units. In the right-hand ratio of this proportion, we're talking about the measure in degrees. So notice on the top, it's going to be the arc length and the measure of the arc, which would be the portions of my circle. On the bottom, I have the circumference and 360 degrees. That's going to be the entire circle's circumference and the entire circle's measure, because remember, a circle has 360 degrees. If I wanted to go ahead and solve this for the arc length, I can also just multiply both sides by 2 times pi times radius, and I can say that the arc length of AB is going to be equal to the measure of arc AB divided by 360 times the circumference, 2 times pi times radius. This next example asks us to find the length of JK, and it asks us to use pi, just use 3.14 for pi. Using the ratio that we just talked about, I know that the measure in degrees of arc JK is going to be 60 degrees, because 60 degrees is the measure of angle M, the central angle intercepting that arc. We know that the radius is 16 inches, so when I plug in what I know, I can say that the arc length of JK is going to be equal to the measure of the arc, which is 60, divided by 360, times 2 times pi times 16, which is what I've plugged in for the radius, because it tells me MK is 16 inches. I can go ahead and solve for the measure of arc JK. First, I'm going to simplify. 60 over 360 would be the equivalent to 1/6. And then 2 times 16 I've gone ahead and done, and that would be 32. And when I multiply it all together, I get 16.75 inches. This next example says to find the indicated measure. Again, use 3.14 for pi. A tells us asks us to find the measure of arc LM. This time I'm given the arc length, which is 16.76 inches. I'm also given the radius, which is 8 inches. I'm going to go ahead and plug that into my proportion and say 16.76 over 2 times pi times 8, which would be the arc length, over 2 times pi times 8, which would be the circumference, equals the measure of LM over 360. Go ahead and you can multiply both sides by 360, and you get 6,033.6 divided by 2 times pi times 8 will be equal to the measure of arc LM. And go ahead and divide that, and it would be about 120 degrees. The next example asks us to find the circumference. Notice I'm given the central angle measure and the measure of the arc, which is 45 degrees. I'm also given the arc length, which is 10.2 centimeters. Go ahead and plug in what I know. I'm going to say 10.2 over 2 times pi times radius equals 45 over 360. Go ahead and cross multiply. You get 3,672 equals 45 times 2 times pi times radius. This asks us to find the circumference. Notice that in the parentheses I have 2 times pi times radius. Well, 2 times pi times radius will give me the circumference. So in order to find the circumference, I am only going to divide both sides by 45, because that will get the circumference 2 times pi times radius alone on one side by itself. So I can say that because 81.6 centimeters would be equal to 2 times pi times radius, the circumference is 81.6 centimeters. This next example says tires from 2 different bicycles are shown. How many revolutions does each tire make while traveling 25 feet? What I can do, the first thing that I need to notice is that for both of these tires, they've given us the spoke length, so from the center of the circle to where the tire begins, and then they've also given me the tire's width. But what I need to do with that is I need to add it together, add those two together to find the radius of the whole entire wheel. If you notice, the radius of the inner part would be 5 inches, and then there's an additional 1.5 inches for the tire. So that would be 6.5 inches would be the radius of one of them, of the two combined, but then the diameter would be 13. This asks us to find how many revolutions. Revolution means how many times can it go around to travel 25 feet. Notice these measures are given in inches. That's going to be important. I know that the circumference of this would be 13 pi. And when I multiply 13 pi, I get 40.82 inches. Now, that means each time that this wheel or tire makes one revolution, it's going to travel 40.82 inches. So if it goes around twice, it would be about 82 inches. If it goes around 3 times, it would be 3 times that amount. But I want to know how many times it has to go around to go 25 feet. Now, I have my circumference in inches, and then I want to know how many it would have to travel in feet. That's not going to be okay. I need one I need both of these numbers to be in the same unit. It's going to be much easier to take 25 feet and change that to inches as opposed to taking 40.82 inches and changing it to feet. I need to take 25 feet, divide it by the circumference of the tire. Go ahead and change 25 feet to inches by multiplying by 12, and you get 300 inches divided by 40.82 inches, which gives you about 7.3. So this tire would have to make 7.3 revolutions to travel 25 feet. It's going to be the same idea for the next example. This time I would have a radius for the whole tire of 10, which means the diameter would be 20. I get that by adding 8 plus 2 is 10, and then that's just going to be the radius of the whole tire, so the diameter would be 20. Go ahead and find the circumference, which would be 20 pi, which is 62.8 inches. Same idea, I need to take the 25 feet, how far I want it to travel, and divide it by how far it'll travel in just each revolution. So this case, it's going to be 25 feet divided by 62.8 inches. Again, I need them both in the same unit, so I'm just going to go ahead and change 25 feet to 300 inches by multiplying by 12. When I divide this, I get about 4.8, which makes sense. This is a larger tire, it has a larger diameter, and so it should take fewer revolutions to travel that 25 feet. This next example says, the top view of a child's toy has 5 boxes that nest together as shown. The distance between the rims of each of these successive boxes is 0.75 centimeters. There is a 180-degree arc at 2 ends of each box. The radii for the first boxes are given. A asks us to find the distance around the rim of the smallest box. Notice what they've told us is that we have 2 180-degree arcs at the 2 ends. Well, what that tells us is we have 2 semicircles on each end of this box. Which means if I have 2 semicircles, that actually means that I'm going to have a full circle when you add the 2 semicircles together. So it's not going to be too bad to find the distance between the successive boxes. This first one asks us to find the distance around the rim of the smallest box. Notice it's been shaded. And then it tells us the radius of the first one is going to be 0.5 inches. It also tells us that S, the side length, is going to be 2 inches. So I have 2 times 2. Why I have that is because both of these S length sides, there's 2 of them and they each measure 2 inches. And then I just need to find the circumference of a circle with a radius of 0.5 inches. So I have 2 times pi times 0.5. Well, 2 times 2 is 4. And then 2 times 0.5 is just going to be 1. And 1 times pi, we're just going to use 3.14 for pi. 4 plus 3.14 is going to give you about 7.14 inches, would be the distance around the rim of the smallest box. B asks us to find the distance around the rim of the second smallest box. It tells us the radius of the second box is 1.25 inches. My S is going to remain the same. My S is going to remain 2. So again, I'm going to have 2 times 2. Because there's 2 sides measuring 2 inches each, plus 2 times pi times 1.25 is going to be the radius of the second smallest box. Well, 2 times 2 again is 4, and when I do 2 times 1.25, I get 2.5, and I'm going to use 3.14 for pi. Go ahead and multiply and add those together, and you get about 11.85 inches. Today's assignment is on page 686. It's numbers 1 through 14 and 16 through 34 even.